Hi, Mike Hansen here. This video is going to go over the object browser in Visual Studio 2013. If you're using an earlier version of Visual Studio, this video may still be helpful. I've been using Visual Studio for about 4 years, and it took me a little while to figure out the object browser. Whether you're building a simple console application or the latest and greatest Windows 8 application, the object browser can help you add additional functionality to your project. I'm going to cover 3 topics. The first is how to add the object browser icon to your toolbar. I use the object browser constantly. The second, I'm going to go over the 5 parts to the object browser. And last, I'm going to go over usability. Let's get started. I want you to add the object browser icon to my toolbar. So the first thing I do is go over here to View, and I find the object browser, and there it is. So at least I know the object browser is located in the View menu. Next thing I do is I right click on the toolbar, and since the standard toolbar is visible right now, and that standard toolbar is always visible, that's what I'm going to add the object browser icon to. So I go down here to Customize, and click on Commands, and again I want to modify the toolbar. And again, it's going to be the standard toolbar. And luckily everything's in alphabetical order. Select the standard toolbar. And then I want to add the command. And remember, the object browser icon is located on the View menu. So I scroll down to View. And again, luckily everything's in alphabetical order, so I scroll down to the O's. And there's the object browser. Click on OK. And if you notice, the object browser is located at the beginning of my menu. If you look right here, and if you look up here in the upper left hand corner. Well, I want to move the icon all the way over here to the far right. So I go ahead and I click on the move down. And if you look at the top, you can actually see the icon moving across the toolbar. And right there. I go ahead and I click on Close. And from here I can open the object browser. The object browser has 5 parts to it. Towards the top is the toolbar, which has 6 components. Below that is the search bar, which has 3 components. And then off to the left here is the object pane. The object pane lists the libraries, or dynamic link libraries. And within each library are 1 or more namespaces. And then within each namespace is 1 or more objects. Now I can go ahead and I click on a library and get a brief description of that library down here in the description pane. I can do the same thing with a namespace, or if I click on an object such as a class here, it will pull up all the members within that class and it'll display here in the members pane. So again, you have the object pane over here to the left, you have your members pane in the center, and you have your description pane towards the bottom. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the toolbar. And the first object I'm going to talk about is the browse. And right now, browse says all components. And if you look, you have multiple versions of the same assemblies. Come down here, you have another one, and then you have some more. Well, with the browse, I can limit that scope, and in this case I'm going to select .NET Framework 4.5.1. And as you can see, we don't have duplicate libraries listed anymore. There's 2 other interesting elements to the browse. If I scroll down here towards the bottom, and one is called the Edit Custom Component List. Visual Studio has quite a few libraries available to it. But if you know you only use a certain specific set of libraries, you can create your own custom set. Similar to the Framework 4.5.1 or Framework 3.5, you can create your own custom set. And that way you don't have to constantly wade through all those libraries. I've never used this feature, but who knows, maybe in the future I will. Another one is called My Solution. Well, I don't have a solution loaded right now, so let me go ahead and load one up. It's going to be called Object Browser Demo. And if I go to My Solution, you see it over here to the left. My Solution is going to list all of my references, or libraries in this case. So if I come over here to the right, it has the same libraries listed. Going back over here to the left, you see I have a namespace called Object Browser Demo. And within that namespace I have a couple of classes. And if I expand employee, you can see that employee inherits from person class. If I come over here to the right and I do the same thing, if I expand employee, I don't get the same results. Another tool that you can use is called the class view. Again, if I expand that, it lists all my references, and then it also has the namespace. And then it lists all the classes within that namespace, and of course if I expand employee, you can see employee inherits person. Just for a side note, under references, it lists the Microsoft Core library here. If I go back to the Solution Explorer, it does not list that core library. So keep in mind that the references in the Solution Explorer might not list all of the references. You might need to go to the class view to get that. Somebody had posted a question just several years ago on the internet: how do I know which libraries are loaded when I create specific types of projects? The class view or the object browser will tell you. And let me go ahead and open up Program, and you can see the Object Browser Demo listed there. And again, there's a Microsoft Core library. Let me go back to 451. Edit Custom Component Set, we already talked about that. And then you have these navigate back and forward buttons. They work very similar to what a web browser might have, except they tend to be a little bit quirky. They don't work quite as nice, because if you look, I have 451 listed. Now I've gone back too far. Add library to solution. Let me go back to 451. Let's say I want to add the accessibility class to my solution. I can go ahead and I can click on the accessibility. Then I click on this icon, and it lets me know that it has been successfully added. And there it is, accessibility. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. And probably the most important icon is the settings. In my case, I have all options selected. If you look at the first one, View Containers show the actual libraries. If you notice here, little icon, that's the icon for a library. The little squirrely brackets, those are for identifying namespaces. And then there's a whole bunch of different icons for identifying various objects. If I click on View Namespaces, it hides all the libraries and it just shows the namespaces. I prefer this view. Next is Show Base Types and Derived Types. Well, with a lot of objects, there's usually base types and derived types. And if you don't want to see those for some strange reason, you can hide those. Personally, I like being able to see those. Even though I'll take a peek at the base types more often than the derived types, because a lot of times the derived types are empty, but I will look at the base types quite a bit. Show hidden types. Well, if you look over here under accessibility, you can see that a couple items are grayed out. That means that those are hidden. These objects are hidden, and if I click on the object, it pulls up the members, and those members are hidden as well. That means if I'm writing my code, these objects will not show up in IntelliSense. And of course I can hide them if I want to, but I like to see all the hidden objects. And then show public members, well, that's pretty straightforward. Show protect members, pretty straightforward. And show others. Show others will show members with an access modifier of internal or friend. Again, others will show members with an access modifier of internal or friend. Why they just didn't add a fourth option, I don't know. Next is show inherited members. To give you a demonstration of that, let me scroll down to System Drawing, the text namespace, and font collection. Right here you see several members listed. If I uncheck inherited members, a bunch of them disappear. Well, if I go into the base types, font collection inherits from disposable and object. So all of these members that actually belong to iDisposable and iObject are no longer visible. Personally, I like to see all the members right up through the entire inheritance chain, so I always keep this object selected. And the last one is show extension members. Let me scroll back up to the core of Microsoft Core library, and I think it's the generic collection and dictionary. Extension members. Again, if I uncheck that, that folder disappears. Personally, I like to be able to see the extension members. Extension members allow you to add additional functionality to a class even if you don't have the source code with you. Next, I'm going to go over the search menu. The search bar can help you identify classes and members quickly. Let's say I want to add speech recognition to my program. So I type in speech and I hit the enter key, and it's going to pull up a bunch of stuff. Well, I've actually used a speech recognizer before, so I know that this is exactly what I want. But let's say I wasn't sure. I can always hit the F1 key and bring up the help menu. And once I review the help menu, I decide that's exactly what I want. Now if you notice, I'm pointing at the class. But at this point, I can just go ahead and add this entire library to my project by clicking the Add Library to Project. And it'll let me know that the library was added. And there's my speech. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that. There's the search icon or the search button, although I find it easy just to press the enter key. And then I go ahead and I can clear the search if I want to. The object pane. The object pane lists all of the libraries, and within each library lists one or more namespaces, and within each namespace lists all the different objects. I'm going to go over some of these icons. If you hover your mouse over the icon, this flowchart looking icon is actually a class. This one that looks like a briefcase is a delegate. And if I scroll down, the two little yellow squares, that's an enumeration. And this one that looks like a little circle pointing to a big circle, that's called an interface. And then this one looks like a doorway, that's called a struct. If I go ahead and I click on some of these, the members pane also has icons, and if I hover my mouse over these, you can tell that this is a method. And you can tell that it's a method because there's little parentheses at the end of it. This one has parentheses. This one's a method and also has parentheses, but there's actually something inside the parentheses. There's actually a little star next to this method that tells us that it's a protected method. Here we have some operator overloads going on. And then down here we have some properties, and you can tell that they're properties because it'll either have get or set in the parentheses. Moving on for some more icons. Here we have events, and events look like a lightning bolt. Here we have some constants, and again it looks like two blue squares overlapping one another, very similar to an enumeration, just the colors are different. And there's one more I want to show you, and that's Boolean, and here we have some constants, which looks like a dark blue cube. Now when you're in this mode, you can press the F1 key at any time. Again, I can select the namespace and I can hit the F1 key, and it's going to give me a description of that namespace. I can do the same thing with an object. And I can do the same thing with members. Select a member here in the members pane, hit the F1 key. So if this little description pane doesn't answer your questions, just select the item and hit the F1 key to get further information about it. Now we're going to drill down to some functionality. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over those base types and derived types. First, for the base type, go to System Collection Generic, and I'm going to use the dictionary as an example here. Look at the base types. The dictionary actually inherits all of these objects. And if I hit the F1 key, there's the dictionary, and these are all the objects that it inherits right here. And if you notice, there's quite a few members in the dictionary class. And if I try to hide the inherited members, not that much really disappears. Now let me go over the derived types. And I'm going to use iCollection. Okay. All of these objects use the iCollection interface at some point. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the linked list. And I don't want the enumerator, I want the actual linked list itself. And again, if I hit the F1 key, again there's the linked list, and there's iCollection. So base types are all the objects that a class inherits. Derived types are all the classes that make use of that object. For some strange reason, I had a difficult time understanding that concept. Now let's get into the programming aspects of things. Whenever you create a project, any kind of project, whether it's a console application in this example, or a Windows 8.1 application, or a Windows form or website, certain libraries automatically load. Okay. In this case, we also have the Microsoft Core library, which is not listed in the Solution Explorer. We also have several namespaces. So in order for you to use a class, you have to have the library loaded, you have to have a reference to that library, and at the same time you have to have a specific namespace loaded. Remember, in the Microsoft Core library, you have the System Collections Generic. And inside the System Collection Generic, and I'm looking at the wrong one, inside the System Collection Generic you have the dictionary. So if I start typing dictionary here, the IntelliSense is already kicking in for me and helping me out. Because I have the library loaded and I have the namespace loaded up here, IntelliSense was able to help me out. And if you hover your mouse over that, you get a brief description of what it does. But let's say we have the library loaded, but we don't have the namespace loaded. For example, we have the Microsoft Core library loaded, and I want to use something from the System Collections class. I want to use the queue down here. Well, if I start typing, the computer says no. But if I hover my mouse over it, a little blue squiggly line appears, and it's telling me which namespace I need to use. In this case, using System Collections. So if I go ahead and I click on that, it has that namespace for me. The reason being is the Microsoft Core library, which is loaded, has the System Collections namespace for me. Whenever Visual Studio loads a bunch of libraries, it starts going through those libraries and sees what's in there. And it identifies the namespaces. And it also identifies what classes are in those namespaces. That's why sometimes Visual Studio can help you out, and sometimes it can't. Let me give you a demonstration of when it does not help you out very much. Again, let's say I want to use the speech recognizer. So again, I go down here and I type in speech recognizer SR equals new. Okay, so I go to hover my mouse over that and a little blue line appears. No, I don't want to generate a class for that. Well, I have two options at this point. I can go ahead and I can select the word and hit the F1 key, and hopefully something will appear in the help, online help. It's in the speech recognizer class. It's in the System Recognizer speech. So at least it gives me an idea where this is located at. The other option, again, is to go into the object browser, type in speech, and there's the speech recognizer I need. Again, if I want to make sure, I can hit the F1 key, and once I verify that's exactly what I want, I can add it. And as you see, the system speech has been installed. And now if I hover my mouse over that little blue line, it tells me what namespace I need to use. And presto. Go ahead and compile it, make sure I don't have any silly little errors. Well, that concludes my video on the Visual Studio Object Browser. I hope you find this information useful. My plan is to produce more videos on Visual Studio topics or C# topics where either no video exists or what videos do exist don't go into enough detail. I do take suggestions, although keep in mind I am not an expert in Visual Studio, nor am I an expert in C#. Take care.